The Nile logo appears on screen. Emergency Management, Access and Functional Needs, Disability Awareness Training.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Parker with the New York Association on Independent Living, or NILE. So happy to be hosting today's webinar for NILE members and the public. And it's such an important topic today, emergency management, access and functional needs, disability awareness training. We know that we are having extreme weather events more and more frequently, and obviously people with disabilities are impacted, and it's critical that we as disability advocates are at the table. And so that is the point of today's webinar, to hear what is happening, what can we be doing, how can we be more involved to make sure emergency preparedness efforts are considering the needs of our community. I am super thrilled to present today's to introduce today's presenter. Many of you may already know David Whalen. He has been doing disability awareness training out of New York for a long time now, but is currently the project director of Niagara University's Emergency Responder Disability Awareness Training, which is really the only training program of its kind in the nation, and has worked closely with FEMA Region 2 Office of Disability Integration and coordination on establishing these core advisory groups that we're going to hear about, including establishing New York State's core advisory group earlier this year, which he co-chairs. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave Whalen. Dave.
Thanks, Megan. Good Thursday morning, everyone. So excited to have you in here. We have a real good number of folks, so that is very appreciative of your interest in this topic. Some of you have probably gone through the program that we provided a couple of years ago. The objective of this training is inclusive planning and active participation. While you're going to get a lot of quality information today, 2 hours is scratching the surface of the 2-day program that we provide that actually could be 3 days or 4 days. A quick history on myself. I've been in the field of disability since 1986. As a developmental disability service provider, I'm the parent of 24-year-old twins. They were born 11 weeks premature. From that, my son David has spastic quadriplegia, cerebral palsy, dysarthria, epilepsy, low vision, and seizure disorder. He actually works for us here at the office 1 day a week. Started disability awareness training in 2004 off of a prompt from my sister, Kathleen Vandeloo, who runs the Association Development Group, does some work with the NILE. Kathy came to me noting her concerns with one of her clients, the New York Public Transit Association, which had stated to her that we were being blasted by disability advocates and had nowhere to turn. So fast forward, in 2010, I came together with Niagara University to put in for the grant from the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council on first responder disability awareness training. In 2016, they sole source funded us for this program here. That program led to ultimately the Inclusive Planning Active Participation, a culmination of about 7-8 years of work on this topic. However, as time goes on, we continue to expand and improve. So we're excited to bring this program. There'll be some new material in here that for some of you folks that attended a couple of years ago would not have been privy to. We're currently in Nebraska and Louisiana with this program now, year 2, and we are about to be sole source funded in Missouri starting January 1 with the same content. South Dakota is also inquired. I want to spin it back to New York. I'm really excited that the NILE reached out to us to do this presentation because we need to, again, get that groundswell going specific to the deficiencies that are occurring in our state. Sometimes not the fault of anyone, but a lack of awareness of where to turn and where to access that information. You know, as New Yorkers, we experience our fair share of disasters. Louisiana recently had made a comment on why do we have someone from New York providing us with information? We have our own challenges here. I boldly reminded them that New York also has hurricanes, Superstorm Sandy, obviously to point out to them. More people died in New York and New Jersey than it did in Louisiana through Hurricane Ida. And we're certainly not looking to compare notes. Obviously, we would like those to be zero, but the sensitivity of what we experience in our state. We have a very unique state, from hurricanes to snowstorms to ice storms, and other things in between, including the major terrorist attack. So understanding it in the context of how this program plays out. So with that said, I'm going to get right into the presentation, and Alex, if you could share the screen.
You wanted me to share the slides, Dave?
Yes, if you could put the PowerPoint on, please, and we'll get going. Alex, I could do it from my end if that's what you were waiting for. I got it right.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, folks. There we go. All right. Now we have a program. All right. Again, I thank the New York State Association of Independent Living for pulling this together, and look forward to working with them on our initiatives, of which we will be talking about today. Start off with this quote here from MLK: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And that could be more imperative or specific to the topic at hand today. The challenges that we face with emergencies and disasters into catastrophes, the grading of those, if you will, emergency, disaster, catastrophe, affects all of us. And while we talk about planning and preparedness, response and recovery specific to people with disabilities and access and functional needs, it's inherent on all of us. What does your plan look like? Are you prepared for that? We're going to be providing you some tools today to take back to your agencies. One of the charges I ask you to do after today is ensure that the information we're providing you is disseminated. Hard copy, website. Do you have links on your sites that are specific to emergency planning and preparedness? We'll talk about the advocacy with emergency management offices and that relationship a little bit later on. But we're all affected by this, and you're going to hear some pointed comments coming up specific to this topic in a couple of minutes. What are the main objectives of what we provide? Defining access and functional needs and disabilities. Defining the key terms related to inclusive planning. This program does not work without people with disabilities and access and functional needs sitting at the table. Identify appropriate resources to assist in planning for and with adults and children with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. The nice part about what we've been able to do being funded for these programs is research, study, find, receive, and disseminate the latest tools, resources, materials specific to this topic. We're going to be providing you again with some of those in the chat box. They're going to be available post-training through the NIAL and their website. And at any time, feel free to contact our office with questions or need areas. We're all in this together. I'm not one that does a webinar or a presentation or a training and hope the audience gets it and walks away and says, "Good luck, everyone." No, we're all a part of this. And being funded by the state of New York a few years ago through the Development Disabilities Council, we maintain our relationship and sustainability with that grant by providing these tools and resources and the relationship we have with people on this call and beyond that. Identify the essentiality of inclusive practices. Learn how to incorporate access and functional needs in all phases of emergency management, which can be a challenge, and it's a process. It's not something that's going to be done over a couple months. It's over a couple years, and it never ends. It's always an agenda item. Understanding disabilities as it pertains to emergency planning, preparedness, response, and recovery, and the ADA and emergency management. The beauty of the ADA is that it provides us with guidance specific to this topic, amongst other topics. Of course, you want to open up a daycare center and be compliant with the ADA, they got a full 40, 50-page guidance that you can have for that. Specific to emergency management, it spells out what needs to be done. Now, it needs to be updated, and I made that comment to FEMA headquarters, and apparently it's sitting in a queue somewhere in FEMA headquarters, but we'd like to see that updated. But for the most part, 85, 90% of it is still very pertinent, with just the need, again, for a couple updates. That's the objectives of our program. This is Richard DeVelder. Unfortunately, we lost Richard a couple years ago. He is one of the pioneers on disability advocacy and this topic. The first two lawsuits in this country were Oakland and Los Angeles. The third was New York City. The fourth was Washington, D.C. Richard, if you could make out this picture, has no arms and legs. Richard's comments to people with disabilities and access and function needs: you need to plan as if nobody's coming. Sometimes we view emergency managers and spin that off into fire departments with the thought that someone's going to come and get me if I fill out a form. We don't promote the registries. I don't even believe I'm bringing them up today in the content of PowerPoint. That's not an efficient way to address emergency planning and preparedness. One county in this state has put all their eggs in one basket, which is inappropriate, specific to planning and preparedness, and actually dangerous, especially for people with disabilities and access and functional needs. So it's on us to plan and prepare. Again, some of those tools will be provided for you. And also from an agency or an organization standpoint, what are we doing to promote this? Statistic I saw a couple years ago was that 23% of the American population has done planning and preparedness specific to personal and family needs. I wonder if that number is even high. If we polled 10 people and I would hear that 2 or 3 of them did that, I would hope that that would be accurate, but I would be concerned that that's even the case. So again, it's inherent on all of us, and it never ends. Self-preservation. Do we have the cognitive ability to do so? We have 30 million Americans or so with a cognitive disability. Doesn't mean all of those individuals can't self-preserve or understand self-preservation. However, we think about the challenges with our 5.7 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease, plus the other 12 dementias, upwards of about 7 million Americans plus. Some individuals with intellectual disability, some individuals with autism, some individuals with traumatic brain injury, some individuals with serious mental illness fall under that category. Physical limitations that challenge that. My son, a wheelchair user, knows he needs to get out, but when he's in bed at night, it's me and my wife getting him out of bed. Individuals who have physical limitations. And what's the number one disability in this country? Walking. And we don't define disability by the medical diagnosis or the term, we define it by functional limitations. 40 million Americans have some form of walking disability. So certainly concerning. Sensory disabilities. And one of the big pieces with the sensory disabilities is the ability to utilize assistive technology specific to alarms. The National Fire Protection Association has recently did a full study on alarms for deaf and hard of hearing. That's going to be in our next newsletter, and I can forward that if people want to read it. It's not a great read, but if you're interested in it, obviously, we'll make sure you get that. I should note I sit on the Disability Accessibility Review and Advisory Committee for the National Fire Protection Association. They're the global leader in codes and guidance specific to anything fire safety planning and preparedness. We just recently updated the evacuation guide. I'll speak to that a little bit later on. And then people who might actually ignore or put themselves in harm's way. Someone who doesn't recognize the drill. I ran a program for people with developmental disabilities here in Niagara County for 17 years. The most involved individuals with DD, every fire drill we had, there would be 2, 3, 4 people that did not egress. So individuals who didn't recognize that alarm or actually were obstinate or aggressive in assisting them in trying to leave. So those areas that we talk about specific to self-preservation, the ability to do that in simplest terms. We're going to watch what will be a little bit of a disturbing video here. When I show this video, especially in Louisiana, we did our full training in Louisiana yesterday virtually. I note the trigger. There can easily be some people there who have experienced this or might even know some of the individuals or the individual that's highlighted here. The right to be rescued, which I'll expand on more in a couple minutes, is an 80-page journal article written by Adrian Wegben, Yale Law Journal. I'll be specific to that more in a couple minutes. And you'll see that this is just a trailer to the full video. You can read the full guidance. We can put that in the chat box. Carrie will put that in the chat box for you. Excuse me, I should say the full article. Or you could do the Cliff Notes and watch your take part in the video.
Lake Pontchartrain and having 2 levees on either side of her. For someone being in a wheelchair on the first floor, when you've got a 30-foot wall of water coming in, there's no hope. I met Benny when I was about 19, 20 years old. The first day that we met was actually in an Italian class, and a very sweet voice. She said, "Hi, my name's Benilda, but my friends call me Benny." And after that, she was always Benny, and she was always my friend. She enjoyed life. You know, she loved chocolates and coffee and smoking her cigarettes. Benny had a rare form of muscular dystrophy. She used an electric wheelchair. She had no use of her 2 lower legs. There was no strength in them. One of her arms she had partial use out of, and the other arm she had pretty good strength in. But then as the years progressed, she was losing some of the strength. She could cook. She always lived, of course, on a first floor apartment. She had a shower that she could go into. So joy of life and independence were the 2 most important things for her personally. She wanted other people with disabilities to have comfortable lives, to make sure that they were protected, that people didn't take advantage of them. She volunteered with a bunch of disability rights organizations. Anything that she could do to get involved and give back. She had decided that she was going to evacuate. She had called a company that was supposed to come and get her, and she said that they were going to take her to the Hyatt. I did not get a phone call from her that day, and at first I thought maybe she got busy, who knows why, but I thought, well, I'm going to try and call her. I said, "Benny, what are you doing still there?" She said, "Pam, they've abandoned me." She said, "Yes, I spoke to the driver." And I said, why didn't he come and pick you up?" She said, "He told me, I can't come and get you. I've got my own family to worry about." And he hung up on her. The police told Benny that they would take her to the Superdome. They did not want to take her wheelchair or her physical assistant. She physically could not have gotten by without the help of someone, and without her wheelchair, she couldn't have made it. Storm passed. Everything seemed okay. I called, and she let out a huge sigh of relief. And we started talking and just kind of relaxing. Then all of a sudden, she said that she heard something. She goes, "Wait, I hear something." And she goes, "Oh my God, water's coming in." And I could just hear this panic in her voice. And then all of a sudden, the phone line cut out.
The Right to be Rescued. Click here to watch the whole film now.
Unfortunately, Benny became the poster child for all issues related to what we're talking about here today. Unable to evacuate before or during Hurricane Katrina, Benilda told her friend the water was rushing into her home just before her phone went dead. Her body and wheelchair were found floating inside her home several days later. This is actually a FEMA slide. I'll reference FEMA and talk more about their role with this and what we've done to work with them on this topic. A couple of points to be made off of Pam's comments or Pam's narrative. The driver, did he do something wrong? or was he attending to his own needs during a disaster? And I'm not looking for a yes or no on that. Those are things that come to play here. Katrina was the benchmark to exposing the injustices in response to people with disabilities and access and functional needs with disasters. The infirm, elderly, poor, and disabled were the most prolific deaths within that led to the Post-Katrina Act. The Post-Katrina Act then started the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination at FEMA. The first director, Marcy Roth, many of you may be familiar with Marcy. She'll see her in video soon. Marcy then moved on to start the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, and now she is the executive director of the World Institute on Disability. If you're not connected with the World Institute on Disability, I'd ask you to go to their website. They'd have webinars, a lot of that specific to global. The current director, Linda Mastandrea, is also someone we work closely with. Linda is actually aware of what we're doing in states, and I have a good working relationship with her as I do with Marcy. Marcy is actually one of our consultants in our grants, including the New York State grant. So our program and product, if you will, has been endorsed by Marcy. The Post-Katrina Act then led to the ODIC, as I stated. You'll see Administrator Fugate in a picture coming up. In 2011, I was invited to the White House, March 2011, for the historic signing by FEMA and the National Disability Rights Network, Kurt Decker, whereby recognizing through a memorandum of understanding that the needs of the disability community in our country need to be front and center, built into the context. In 2013 and 14, I was invited to the Emergency Management Institute by FEMA. I'm going to turn the video on to be trained in and ultimately be a trainer for FEMA, integrating aspects of functional needs into emergency planning. This program never got launched, but the nice part about it was having the content here in the program. We were able to build that into our training, which again, part of what you're receiving today, individuals again that went through the 2-day program through 2017, 18, 19. We did 20 of those across the state. And who have the manual, the trainer manual. You have received much of that content. So we're consistent with what's to be spread and shared out there. Again, this is a process and it's ongoing. Some of the tools and information you're going to be receiving today and we're going to be exposing to you today came about this year. There's been 3 excellent tools this year, of which we will again expose to you and also have available through NILE. But continuing on with the right to be rescued here. Reading some of what Adrienne put into her journal article. Few people would argue directly that persons with disabilities deserve less assistance during times of disaster. But the systemic exclusion of persons with disabilities from disaster plans, coupled with arguments that it may be impossible to meet the needs of all people during times of disaster, suggests a widespread, if tacit, endorsement of the notion that it is fine to value life differently when push comes to shove. Due to widespread prejudice, historically, even those with moderately limiting disabilities have been viewed with pity and discomfort rather than as fully functioning human beings worth saving. Continuing, such beliefs have already influenced a variety of emergency policies and raised the death tolls of persons with disabilities during disastrous events. During Hurricane Katrina, for instance, the infirm, elderly, poor, and disabled were the most likely to die. Despite the known vulnerabilities of persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups, one study found that fewer than a quarter of the emergency operation plans of numerous county and city governments across the U.S. address in depth the needs of the most vulnerable population groups. And this is our gap. And this is an issue. And this is what we continue to work on. Now, we're not sitting here damning emergency managers. I did my training in Nebraska, trainings 5 and 6, 2-day program last month. I sat in a room with 5 emergency managers. They were an office of 1, 1, 1, 1, and 2. One of those emergency managers, be it rural counties, regardless, was the emergency manager for 3 counties. They don't know where to turn. The reason disability awareness training started was because the New York Public Transit Authority Association didn't know where to turn. So our intention is to provide you with tools. And as I said earlier to someone, and I'll say it again today, and now we're all in this together. And that's why we don't leave you after we train today. The intention is that your core advisory groups are begun. We'll explain that more, that you're active in the planning process, inclusive planning and active participation, and that we are ensuring that these areas are being addressed. So the full article, Carrie put in the chat box. You can download it. Again, right here. It's a good read, folks. I'm going to give you some homework here today. So I'm always cautious in plopping a lot of information in, because if you're going to open it, I hope you read it, because I never do a training where it's just training and taking notes, and then tomorrow we go back to our standard grind. The intent is that there's going to be some actionable items, even with a 2-hour program. So inclusion. So, I simply put, and again, many of you are disability advocates and service providers and aware of what we're talking about today, but inclusion is the number one bullet, the number one topic on from the National Council on Disabilities, which was somewhat dormant through the Trump administration, no surprise. And I believe that the Biden administration is looking to resurrect it. But their guidance, which is what their function is, to guide the federal government on disability matters and topic areas, and in essence set the agenda for the country, recognizes inclusion as their number one topic. A term used by people with disabilities and other disability rights advocates. So I always make the point here, not used by parents, educators, government, medical professionals, people with disability rights advocates, and people with disabilities. All people should freely, openly, and without pity accommodate any person with a disability without restrictions or limitations of any kind. Now, simply put, so this is what we show and educate emergency management on. Some may be on this call. Feel free, if you are an emergency manager, to reach out to us as well for ongoing tools. We work very closely with the New York State Emergency Management Association. Chris Baker, the president, I just corresponded with the last couple of days, and I'll come back on that more a little bit later on, and what we're looking to do to advance our agenda, which includes, for all intent purposes, everyone on this call. What you're also doing is a form of cultural awareness and diversity training. Disability awareness training is just that. We used to call it cultural diversity training. Its roots, the Civil Rights Act. Can no longer discriminate against people of color. Were we prepared for that? Obviously, we still have a ways to go with that topic area. But we've expanded that definition, and this is actually comes from the feds, cultural awareness and diversity now, race, ethnicity, religion, culture, expanded into gender. We have a little movement in this country, and we still continue to see women paid less in corporate America. As a matter of fact, statistically, it's $400,000 less over the course of a 30-year tenure a woman would receive in corporate America today. Worst profession, attorneys, 43% difference in pay rate, same job. Presentation of women in this country, the expectation, sexual harassment, domestic violence. The equality bill that sat dormant for 60 years after Alice Paul wrote it in 1926, now being brought back to the table through the Biden administration. It's something we really want to push, folks. That's why we advocate. Ensure that gets pushed forward. Generational, or discrimination against people who are aging, or what we call ageism. Actually, sexual orientation. I always get a kick, excuse me, let me go back here. I always get a kick out of aging and generational discrimination, because you know what we're all doing right now? We're aging. So we're going to be joining that club sometime. And we expand on that with our access and functional needs definition. Actually, sexual orientation needs to be changed now. I'm remiss on this, apologies. Sexual preference and gender identity is proper terminology now. And respecting that, you're going to see some points to be made specific to disasters in a minute. And then disability. As recognized by the Obama administration, people with disabilities are the most discriminated minority in the country. But our gap, folks, is you go poll 25 people today at lunch and ask them the most discriminated minority in the country, you might go 0 for 25 with people saying people with disabilities. So we have a huge gap. And the reason we are so adamant about this topic here is this is the life and death topic here, as is my other first responder content and training. Yeah, we continue to be maintained sustainable. I should make this note, related topic, but not directly related. This is law enforcement in this state has been receiving our training since 2016 in the basic course. And the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services continues to fund us to train. As a matter of fact, I'll be training officers next week virtually, and then next month in person. And our master trainer is going around the state doing more of that. Our master trainer for law enforcement through our office. So note that these initiatives can happen. We get the right people and the right response. It's embraced and understood that it's necessary. Have to be cautious in overly criticizing certain professions when sometimes it's just a couple of bad apples, but it doesn't mean that they don't need disability awareness training. Everyone needs it specific to the topic area. And for us folks that are well-versed in it, I'm still learning. I got 4 or 5 journal articles I'm reading right now, and everything I read, there's always something new. So we always need to be continuing to enhance our education. And then to pull all this together, the concept of intersectionality, Kimberly Crenshaw, Cornell University professor, 1989, the labor strife at General Motors, whereby the Black and African-American male workers were contesting the lack of promotions, moving up the organizational chart at General Motors. And then the Black and African-American females. So wait a minute. We're discriminated against twice over being females and being a person of color. They lost that, and I'm not sure what the it was went to court, so they lost that, I'll say, suit. Bear with me for not having all the full details on it. But Kimberly Crenshaw then coined the term intersectionality, which is actually based on what MLK was doing anyway and his points. She built off of that. But we can't look at one marginalized or oppressed or discriminated group and not recognize it amongst others. I'm often fascinated when I hear or see one faction that supports inappropriate response to people, say, with disabilities or across this listing here, and doesn't recognize they're basically in the same category. And the King Center, Dr. Bernice King, MLK's daughter, who we had the honor of having on campus here 4 years ago during MLK Week, not MLK Day, but MLK Week, and seeing her speak. The King Center, notice the expanded definition of racism. Not as isolated as we might think. Prejudice, apartheid, ethnic conflict, anti-Semitism, sexism, colonialism, homophobia, ageism, discrimination against disabled groups, stereotypes. I applaud them for recognizing across the cultural awareness and diversity spectrum how it comes to play. That's intersectional. That's a recognition of intersectionality. Racism is total estrangement. It separates not only bodies, but minds and spirits, and inevitably it descends to inflicting spiritual and physical homicide on the outcome. That's a powerful, powerful sentence. And I just have to make a note here, folks. You may be hearing the wind here. We're getting up to 50-mile-an-hour gusts here in Western New York. So that's my window rattling if that's coming through the system here. So noting when we talk about the outgroup and how it comes to play with people across the cultural awareness and diversity spectrum, it's terrifying how it affects us and how it deeply affects us specific to this topic area. So to bring this together in context with our program today, LGBTQ people at higher risk during disasters. They're individuals and families who are particularly vulnerable, age, financial insecurity, pregnancy, and identification with a historically disadvantaged group, including minorities in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community, all factors in increased vulnerability. The report notes that LGBTQ people have historically been socially repressed and excluded. Research has shown that after disaster, LGBTQ people are more likely to be socially isolated and face disrespect or harassment in settings such as emergency shelters. Terrifying. As the father of a 24-year-old daughter who identifies as queer, my daughter is a beautiful, wonderful person. A Cornell University graduate, a New York University graduate, living in Mexico City, becoming fluent in Spanish while working her job, which is Mexican high school students looking to study abroad. It's concerning. So I have concerns with both of my children specific to this topic area. FEMA urges emergency managers to plan for the whole community, and we'll expand on this concept of the whole community. And that's the one we really want to embrace in our discussions and our recognition of needs, including those with civil rights protections, and to quickly restore social safety nets after disaster. So the concerns that go beyond just our topic area, and hence my discussion on intersectionality and recognize this across the cultural awareness and diversity spectrum. So what you're going to have here is a trailer from the, this is also, I think it's a 27-minute video. You can find it on YouTube. Last year during the pandemic, there was a webinar representative people across the cultural awareness and diversity spectrum to include the Latinx USA Latinx Association president. And I'm looking to find that webinar so we can post it so people can access it. It was a wonderful night. It was very enlightening. As I say, we're always learning, but note how this all ties in together here, specific to people outside the spectrum of our specific topic area, but certainly related to us from an intersection.
What's the best way to prepare for disaster? It's a question lots of people are asking these days as the planet heats up and we face one unprecedented disaster after another. My interest in disasters started with one specific disaster that took place in Chicago in July 1995, one of the deadliest heat waves in U.S. history so far.
We go to extremes in Chicago, and that's why people love Chicago. We go to extremes.
I walked into the room and I saw my grandmother lying across the bed, face up. I looked over at the window and it was nailed shut.
Sexiness for the news media was it was about the heat. But the real story is, why were people in these neighborhoods dying? People weren't dying on the north side. People weren't dying in the Gold Coast. People were dying on the south and west sides.
The minute you see the refrigerator trucks, that means there's so many dead bodies that the coroner doesn't have room for them anymore. That's enough.
I think it's really about the heat.
It's not really about the heat. There is no need for as much poverty in our community as there is.
It's a story about these deeper social fault lines that make some members of a city vulnerable and keep others protected and blissfully ignorant about what's happening to people who live quite close to them.
Do you think they're addressing that?
Do I think the city is addressing the extreme poverty in communities of color in Chicago? Is that what you're asking me? Don't be ridiculous.
So what's the best way to prepare for disaster? I guess it depends on where you live.
And Carrie has put the full video in the chat box. Folks, with the Q&A, we're going to come around to questions at the end. So please utilize the Q&A box, though, and we'll come back around. And just to note, we're going to go right up against the 2 hours. I stay around afterwards to continue discussion and dialogue, so I will not be leaving after 2 hours. I always extend. That's my style when doing this, because we have a lot of material. So I squeeze it in and then have Q&A, and sometimes I push past the 2 hours. So I hope you have some time after if you want to correspond or discuss or have comments on anything. All right, so in the heat, and what are we seeing now? That was 1995. One of the tools that we're going to be providing to you is the Access and Functional Needs Toolkit, something that came out earlier this year, March of this year. An outstanding toolkit. Again, a lot to read. And when I tell you I'm giving you homework, these are items you're not going to read in one sitting. You get your highlighter out, you're going to need to go back and forth. But it's an outstanding tool. And one of the beauties of it is that they have, with each section, they recognize the current heat issues with climate change. You know, I mean, of course, everyone knows climate change is real. Those debates are long gone. We don't need to politicize life and death in climate change. The Department of Justice, the Department of Defense and FEMA have been addressing climate change for years and actually include it in their budget and their strategic plans. So you can hear what you want about people who want to denounce or avoid it. But, you know, but it also comes to play with environmental responses, which tie into exactly with what we're doing here. So how are you specific to environmental responses and awareness reduce, reuse, recycle, and everything that goes with standard practice and ensuring we have a planet for our kids and grandkids. So one of the points, and spinning off of the intersectionality here, that we like to stress is we don't just train to say, here's what needs to be done. It's how we need to get it done. What do we need to get there? You know, and when I continue to say that we have items to read and programs to go through, one of the tools here is the U.S. Health and Human Services Cultural Competency, which culturally and linguistically appropriate services, or CLAS, CLAS, is a recognized concept within the federal government. Provide effective, equitable, understandable, and respectful quality care and services that are responsive to diverse cultural health beliefs and practices, preferred languages, health literacy, and other communication needs. You know, and when you're going to see the list that we talk about for this topic, folks, it's 6 or 7 items. You know, and going across to our other list specific to this program model, which is, again, inclusive planning and active participation and emergency planning specific to response planning, preparedness, response, and recovery, and the population at hand. We don't have these 15, 20 item lists. There's some subsets of some of these lists, but the content is basic. The lack of understanding of how to access that exists. Here's something that I'm not going to open this right now, folks, but you can go to this site and pull this up. It's not training for the general public. It's training for emergency managers and first responders, social workers, psychologists and psychiatrists, people who have a role with it, for instance, Department of Health, and actually dentists. And the irony of this is the law, these are 9 to 12-hour trainings. I did take the social worker training, not a social worker. My degrees are bachelor's and master's in psychology, but I felt the social work one was more specific to what I'm doing. But it asked you questions about social work, which I didn't have answers for. But it was a way to understand what they're providing to be able to speak to it. But note the comment at the bottom here. Research shows that cultural minority groups suffer disproportionately during every phase of a disaster. And we've been rattling off the phases, you know what they are now. This e-learning program will equip you with the knowledge, skills, and awareness to best serve all individuals, regardless of cultural or linguistic background. So I referenced the communication, and we'll break these down and be more specific to them to the best extent we can with our time frame here. So what are the main objectives of emergency preparedness? And again, not long lists. The needs of people with disabilities are adequately addressed prior to an emergency. You know, everything I talk about needed to be done yesterday. Everything we are going over needs to happen yesterday. It's of course we're going to be dealing with it tomorrow, but it can't be items that are put off on our agendas. As I state, this is always an agenda item. Whatever the organization or agency you work for or your interests are. You know, are we having this as an agenda item steadily? Are we addressing the ongoing needs? And we can expand on that specific to your roles and responsibilities if you have a question on that. Ensure that people with disabilities are included in the planning process. And again, the essentiality of inclusive practices, as we talked about. Identifying who you are responding to and where they are located. So specific to the emergency management role, who is from congregate care, individual residential alternatives, developmental disability service providers and residences, mental health facilities, senior care across the spectrum of senior care, from apartment complexes to skilled nursing facilities, and it's individual. Think of schools. So this is becomes an expansive topic for emergency managers. The concern is, are we overwhelming them? Well, I'm not going to be concerned with overwhelming. I am going to be concerned with the lack of information they may have, hence our responsibilities again to provide that and to stay on top of that so that it is being addressed. It remains an agenda item, and those agenda items are ultimately checked off, but it's a process. Common miscues. separating service animals from their owners, not allowing evacuation chairs in hallways, not involving the disability community in the planning process. Whether people with disabilities should evacuate immediately or wait for first/emergency responders. So we don't see as much of those in our state, where I hope we're going to be seeing more. I often see this in Missouri, which I've been told is the second most disaster hit state in the country, where I'm in buildings and we have the area of refuge. I'm sure you've all seen those in stairwells. You know, those are not just a place to wait. They need to be large enough. There needs to be a space for people who are using the stairs, as well as someone who is a wheelchair user. But do I want to wait there? For my colleagues and friends on this call who are wheelchair users, how long do you want to sit on the 4th floor or 6th floor of a building waiting? Has there been connections and discussion with the fire department specific to, say, employees in that building, schools, and the students in the school? When I went to, my son went to high school, he is now since long passed, we did a walkthrough, and I met with the vice principal, and I did an emergency plan walkthrough, both the fire and emergency plan. And a couple things came of it. I won't share all of them today. But when we got to the 2nd floor, it's the same high school I went to, so I could tell it was an old school, certainly an elevator. We went into the fireproof room. I then, knowing the chief of that jurisdiction, know him well, cell phone, called John and said, John, when was the last time you talked to the school district about the number of students with disabilities and met with them on their emergency plan? 4 years ago, Dave, give or take. Very concerning. Why? Well, what happens in schools? They come and they go, they graduate. John, do you know how many individuals would have a need specific to rescue for fire? No, I don't. I was told they opened up a whole can of worms with the entire school district. That's why we advocate, folks. I'm not going to sit back and watch that happen. It was interesting too, because I was told I was in a fireproof room, and I asked John, what is a fireproof room? And he said, there's no such thing. I said, okay, good, because the wooden door kind of gave it away to me that it wasn't a fireproof room. So you see how we need to be front and center on this. And then a lot of entities don't make this a priority. Again, a lot of agenda items for a school district, but I'm not dismissing and saying that's okay either. That's why we advocate. Not recognizing non-obvious or invisible disabilities, of which can be a major concern. Recently with IDA, I was on a couple of the calls with Louisiana with IDA. They have the Emergency Management Disability Aging Coalition. It's a statewide entity, and I was invited to join in, and I sat in on the first 3 or 4. And there was discussion of the 2 young men with ADHD who were having real hard time in the shelter. So sometimes some of the disabilities that we think of with this topic area, we need to expand that recognition. There was a need. I believe they were having access to their meds, and the shelter was not a place. And you can imagine, for you folks that have been exposed to or worked with or have people with ADHD in your life, the hyperactive impulsivity side of ADHD can be real challenging. So we need to think about all aspects of the disability spectrum. And non-obvious and invisible disabilities are a challenge for all first and emergency responders. And we make that very clear when we train them. What might a person need? Again, not long list, folks. Durable medical equipment, medications, adaptive equipment, assistive technology, transportation, and other health and medical needs. How do we plan for ourselves? What is personal preparedness? Person recognizes they have a disability that will need additional attention and assistance. So go back to that comment I made earlier about the 30 million plus Americans with a cognitive disability in some individuals. The senior population, the fastest growing population in this country, is 85 years plus. It's a natural part of aging to have memory loss. Doesn't mean it's a natural part of aging to have dementia, but 1 out of 3 Americans with 85 plus will have some form of dementia. 65 plus, it's 1 out of 9. Again, some people with intellectual disability, some people with autism. We noted these earlier. I have a good friend of mine who doesn't recognize it as a disability. He has a half a leg, born with that, has a prosthetic leg. What if he needed to egress and walk 3/4 of a mile? What about individuals who are obese or heavy, who have difficulty walking, who don't recognize they have a disability? Again, our senior population. My grandfather died 1 month shy of 100. Did he recognize that he had disabilities at 99 years or 90 years, 95 years? Do we have critical information readily available? We did a safety awareness training in Sioux Falls, South Dakota 2 months ago, and the emergency manager said to everyone in the audience, people with disabilities and family members and service providers, do you have something next to your bed? What I would like to see is I can come in and I can access that. We're going to provide you with the best tool in the country to have your own personal inventory on this topic. Establishes a support network. Who's in your support network? Has personal needs ready to go. And we're going to provide you with the to-go kits. So what is a network of supports? Who can count on you? I live on a street of all ranches. Kitty corner from me is a resident serving 6 women with cerebral palsy, an IRA. Being on the street of all ranches, I have 11 people with excess and functional needs. And of that, 8 of them are 80 plus, 3 of them are 90 plus. You live on a ranch, you don't move until your next move is when you get the call. Carrie's put in the chat box the to-go kit checklist, which you'll see the 5 different kinds of to-go kit. So people need to assess your abilities, your capabilities. I need to personally assess. Talk about physical stamina, limitations in lifting. So how can I best assess my son? Me and my wife still lift. We should use the track a little bit more. I get it. What's going to happen in 10 years if David's still living with us? Teach people how to assist you and how your devices operate. Okay. With part of our network of supports as individuals know that. Okay. We can't just say I have someone as a network of support, but we've never showed them how our devices work, where our adaptive equipment is, what the assistive technology that we use. Who are the members of your support network, and stay on top of that. Meet with them. Can't have members of your support network and we met 5 years ago. Some people may need assistance in establishing their network. And then what do you carry with you supplies at all times? So a personal support network, a list of family, friends, neighbors, and others who will check on you and assist if necessary. Never depend on one person, the old buddy system. It's going to be somewhat extensive. And what I'm doing right now is developed a letter with information. I'm going to canvass the neighborhood. We're going to provide shoveling of sidewalks for our seniors. We're checking on everyone who has generators, who will be able to share generators. People who have other needs, say lifting needs, supports, because if you go to the next one, you got to be upfront about limitations, say family commitments. My parents are 83 and 81. They live about 2 miles away. They will be going to Florida. They're snowbirds. They'll be going to Florida shortly. They have needs, although they're very active. Still go to the gym every day and go out every day, but still have needs. My father's knee is now bad in his walk. What's my commitment and my availability? I'm not available to him right now. Not available when I travel. The physical stamina, going back to my comments about the ability to lift. Parents used to stay with my son. They can't do that anymore. So we identify people and their role and what they can do. I need to be honest about what they can't do. I got you, car. I'll be over, mom and dad, to help you, but I live 20 minutes away. Share copies of your evacuation disaster plan with them. Again, we'll be giving you some tools to address that with. Make arrangements for them to check on you immediately. That's a powerful word, immediately. If something's happening right now, what do we need? And are we checking on it? And the thing with disasters and emergencies is what? We don't know when it's going to hit. On July 20th of this year, where I am sitting right now, Niagara County, across a stretch of this county into Lockport, New York. If you're familiar with Lockport, it's nice to be training in New York State because I can state some of these towns and you know them. We had 5 inches of rain in an hour. They were canoeing down the roads in Lockport. Half of the campus was flooded. We had buildings that were not functional for 2 to 3 months. No one saw it coming. We had the October storm in Buffalo, October 12, 2006, 2.5 feet of wet, heavy snow on an October day with leaves still on the trees. And all you heard every 20, 30 seconds was as the branches and limbs broke, wondering what was coming through your roof, your car window, your front window. The next day we woke up, You weren't going down the street. There was no one coming over to see you. There was no family that was going to be able to get over there. There was a travel ban. There was trees in the main roads. We had to clean up our own roads. We had to assist our own neighbors. No one saw it coming. So when I say we need to plan yesterday, that's my point. Show the people in your support network your supplies. Teach them how to use adaptive and durable medical equipment. I just need to show my son's aides that are with him right now. They need to know how to use his chair. If they do, we have an orientation with my son and his chair that goes about 20, 30 minutes. Everything specific to his needs. And he can speak for himself, but he's not going to have all the answers to some of the questions. If there's an advance warning, determine what they can do. We know the hurricane's coming. We know the snowstorm's coming. Okay, what are we doing in advance of that? Practice your plan with them. We have to practice it. So this is one of the videos I was referencing earlier with Marcy Roth in it when she was in the role of FEMA ODIC interpreters. There is an ASL interpreter in this, so you do not need to interpret.
Every individual can take important steps to prepare for emergencies and put plans in place in case of a disaster in your community. If you have a disability or other access or functional need, you may have to take additional steps to protect yourself and your family.
People with disabilities and people who have access and functional needs have to take a very proactive position in their personal preparedness.
If you think about it, we do it every day. We're ready for the next little disaster that we will face every day.
I always say prepare as if no one's coming to rescue you, because the reality is in a moderate or large event, no one is coming to rescue you anytime soon.
It may be a very short period of time, it may be a more extended period of time, but you need to prepare as if you're not going to have any of the resources that you might typically depend on.
The best way people can start to plan is by looking at the individual parts of their daily lives and figuring out where the potential gaps are.
Do an inventory of yourself. Do an inventory of the things that you use on a daily basis to be living independently, and then think about what is essential.
Think about the strategies, services, devices, tools, and techniques you use to live with a disability on a daily basis. These may include medications, durable medical equipment, service animals, assistive technology, communication tools, and transportation.
You really have to be focused as to what are your needs if you end up going to a shelter for 4 or 5 days, or if you're stuck in sheltering in place because people just can't get to you. What are the essential things that you're going to need to be able to survive?
As you think about
looks like is very different than somebody else's kit.
You want to be thinking about what is it going to take for you, both in your home and out of your home, to be able to maintain your health, your safety, your independence for a period of, a few hours to perhaps a few days. Preparedness is actually a 365-day-a-year activity that all of us should take very seriously. It's important that every day we do a little something to keep ourselves as prepared as we possibly can.
The most empowering thing you can do is take charge for yourself during disaster, during the little storms and the big storms. And that's probably the most positive thing you can ever do for yourself as a person. Because that gives you control. That gives you control over the outcomes.
Download this brochure about preparing for disaster for people with disabilities and other access and functional needs from ready.gov. Check out the other information available on the site and get started preparing today.
So one of the things I ask of you is to go to ready.gov, have that information in your display racks, your information racks, your website. Again, as I say, have this as an agenda item, which includes the information available. FEMA has done a wonderful job in providing information, and what they did in September for Emergency Preparedness Month was enhance their website, and we're going to put that link in here as well. And you're going to spend some time on that because there's a lot on there. Extensive public service announcements, ASL interpreters with those public service announcements, handouts. It's a part of what we all need to be doing. But again, as an agency, for you folks that have that capacity, enhance that. That video is also on our website. Feel free to access it. So Carrie has put the to-go kit checklist in the box, and in the to-go kit checklist, you're seeing the 5 areas: carry on you, essential items with you all the time, grab and go, easy to carry, items you cannot do without, small and light. So we're not talking about the suitcase here. But we're also not talking about like a little medicine kit. You're going to have items that you're going to need that you can't do without. Home, what are you supplied with right now? We talk about sheltering in place, as they said in the video, for 3 to now we're saying 7 days, but the pandemic blew that out of the water. We were not prepared for that. We're going to close with some pandemic comments at the end. First aid, clothing, tools, bedding, emergency supplies, and items specific to your disability. Bedside, if you can't go to other parts of the home. And then car, for you folks that drive cars, what's in your car right now? Is there water? Is there a blanket? Is there jumper cables? Is there a extended phone charger? Phone chargers that don't call to be connected to the vehicle. What do you have beyond? And certainly other items. You have some candy bars or some power bars. Those are the things we talk about being prepared to have in the car. And I'll just to personalize it, here's my son's backpack. And I should note this with my son, folks. David gives me permission to do this. He obviously gave me permission to show his backpack because he wants to educate as someone who works in the office. He recognizes it's part of his job, but personally, he is okay with me referencing him and showing his items. If he wasn't, I wouldn't be doing it. So just to personalize it, the things to think about. There's a change of clothes, his wallet, gloves, flashlight with his low vision, and not just his low vision, but safety purposes. If we're somewhere and he's out and it's dark, we need to have the flashlight on. That flashlight is actually a military type flashlight. It's like a headlight. But also when we're going out into a parking lot. Umbrella and poncho. He has a power wheelchair with a joystick. We don't want that getting wet. You see chapstick, a hat for obvious reasons. A piece of adaptive equipment is that blue tube next to the umbrella and the hat. We make his forks adaptable when we're out in public, say restaurants. Sunscreen and bug spray to the left and to the right. Hand sanitizer prior to the pandemic. We've always had that with you. Now we should always be sanitizing, folks. Tape measure, because sometimes we'll do instant accessibility reviews, a little bit beyond the emergency planning, but if we're in restaurants or somewhere and we want to educate the owner or manager, we politely will let them know if the moment is right. Straws, as we know, some individuals will need straws. He does. We now have some metal straws as well. He startles. We have his power earmuffs that we carry with him. He wears that during sporting events and other arenas. His diastat for people with seizure disorder. The diastat is the tool that is used. It's a syringe that goes into the rectum. If the seizure goes longer than 5 minutes, we need to save a life. He's never had to use his. His friend has had to use his 3 times. A tool because sometimes we are the ones addressing the needs of his power chair, wipes, and then last but not least, and just to be very open, he has a sit to stand power wheelchair. How he urinates and when we're out in public is he stands up, and you can probably figure out the rest on how that comes to play. So what do we personally have and what are we using specific to that? Apps. What I ask you to do is connect with your county emergency management office and ask them what they do for emergency alerts and notifications. Within the apps that I'm referencing here, you see that you'll have the Niagara County and the Erie County apps. They have emergency plan. I have the Niagara County, the Erie County, and the Genesee County apps on my phone. They don't provide information when it's going to snow or rain. They provide it when there is an issue, when it's going to be a heavy snow or a heavy rain or other need areas. Kind of wait to see if this windstorm is going to register on the app. Identifying emergency services and shelters in the moment. Shelters are not identified in advance because at your shelter that in your area might not be operative or might not be able to be operative. So the intent is not to say, where's the shelter in my town? They don't tell you in advance because they don't want people to rely on that. That might not be the place to go. It might put you in a worse spot. Evacuation maps and routes, and then valuable preparedness info. So each county does their own setup here. This isn't statewide. You have New York Alert, which is actually being, there's a lawsuit against New York Alert based on the inappropriateness of response to the blind and low vision community. I'm looking for an update on that. We should have one at our next New York State Core Advisory Group, but there was inappropriateness with that. Spinning back around to making sure people are part of the planning process. Our state does not have representation from the disability community in a manner that would be functional and serve a purpose. And now they have a lawsuit. Coupled with the lawsuit that we had to file against Andrew Cuomo when he refused to have an ASL interpreter next to him during the pandemic. He was the last of the 50 governors to have an interpreter next to him. The lawsuit was filed. Disability Rights New York, I was quietly a part of that. The Deaf Access Services Western New York and some other deaf advocates on the eastern part of the state were involved. That moved quickly, and the judge did not delay in making that point happen. But we went a solid 2, maybe 3 months before he had an interpreter on screen. And then what you're seeing here is the disaster readiness planner. This is something that we used to purchase, and just recently the company now basically folding because the gentlemen are aging. It was a FEMA grant. We have now taken ownership of this product and can now disseminate it at no cost. And we are doing that in the states that we have been in, which will include New York State. We're looking for an appropriate plan for this. I'm going to turn on my screen. You're seeing the planner here, which is the walkaway. This is for the person who is going to need a disaster readiness planner. Okay, and then my concerns, who can I help? Who can help you? Family, friends, and neighbors, groups and organizations, emergency services. Who can you help? This is what the person walks away with. This is the readiness guide. And the readiness guide is utilized by the emergency manager, firefighter, or someone in the know in this topic. This has a sister program for fire safety planning, but that is done by a firefighter with the person who needs the planner. But just a quick note here to read the bottom here. Topics to include in planning with planners who are caring for young children or infants. And when we talk about access and functional needs, which we're coming upon that, it goes beyond the disability community. Blind or have low vision, deaf or hard of hearing, use assistance to understand warnings and directions. Some people may not understand warnings and directions because they do not speak or read English, have an intellectual disability, or for other reasons. Adapt planning and practices to fit their needs, involve trusted aides, nurses, neighbors, and family members in planning and practicing. explain plans simply, practice regularly, practice cooperative decision-making so they can participate in deciding to stay or go, emphasize acting quickly when warning is given. So you see how it's getting specific to certain populations and what we might need to do to take that extra step so the person has a functional planner that they can actually use. Use mobility aids, and then use assistance to live at home, which has a elderly person's hand holding another person's hand. Involve support persons in planning. Check that they practice regularly with the person they support. Spell out arrangements with family members and aides in advance who will do what. Okay, so this is a tool that we're going to be advancing in the state. The states that we have been funded in, New York being one of them, obviously the ones I noted. We are bringing this into the state. Something I want to talk about with the association, NILE and NYSILC, and have a coordinated effort to get this out. But it is now coming. We used to pay $1 a piece for these, and now we own them, which is wonderful. And we're at Carrie and I are in the process of establishing how we're going to disseminate this. What Carrie's going to put in the box is the planners. Get myself off the screen here. Is the planners that we're going to be addressing here. So personal preparedness, the tools we want you to print out and walk away with. 4 elements of evacuation information. So in contemplating what evacuation is, this comes right from the National Fire Protection Association and is built into our evacuation checklist for people with disabilities and access and functional needs. So notification, and notification is basically on what is happening, what is the emergency that's coming to play here. So we notify, we find a way out. Where is the way out? I always ask people when you go into any building, if you're going into a theater tonight or a restaurant, we always look at the second way out. People always say, well, I'll go out the way I came in. That might not be available. Use of the way, can I get out by myself or do I need help? So self with device, self with assistance. And if I need assistance, what kind of assistance might I need? So Carrie's going to put in the NFPA evacuation guide for people with disabilities. A note to be made here. The guide you are receiving is the one that we are no longer going to be utilizing. We worked on it for about a half a year, the updated version. We're going from 67 pages to 17 pages. We're eliminating a lot of the excess information, of which you will see here. While important maybe as far as understanding, we don't need to have the history of the ADA in our evacuation planning guide. Our being the NFPA's evacuation planning guide. In the back of the one you're going to be receiving is going to be information on fire codes and such. Valuable, but what we're doing is pulling it together and tightening it up just for the evacuation purposes. The middle of the one you're going to be receiving does have evacuation planning checklists. I think you'll find it purposeful. You're going to note in there some archaic language. One of the first things I pointed out when I got on this committee, I'm still the baby on the committee, about 2 years in running here. All virtual to tell you, they always used to meet in person, so I've never met in person. So I started early on in the pandemic. So going on 2 years as a member. But for instance, they had hearing impaired in there, which we don't say anymore. And they broke it down by disability. So they made so the new tool will be coming out. We will certainly get that out in droves, and again, utilizing entities like the association and the NYSILC to do that. Okay, so in the chat box, you have the to-go kits, you have the NFPA evacuation guide now, the one I referenced, which is 67 pages, so it is a print. You might want to condense that to just take out the pieces with the evacuation plan. What I think is the best tool, I referenced this earlier, is the Mid-America Regional Council. The MARC is the Mid-America Regional Council Personal Preparedness Inventory. Again, turning on my screen, this is a 43-page everything you need to know tool from the council. The council covers 8 counties around Kansas City, both Kansas and Missouri sides of the border, and is very progressive in their planning. Again, think of Missouri and the challenges they have. They're well ahead of the curve as far as what we're doing in our state. It's going to be a nice walk into that state with our program because we're already walking in, we're going in running, not even walking. So the content of the personal preparedness inventory includes communications, getting info about hazards and communicating with others, equipment, DME and assistive devices, food and supplies, special dietary needs and preference, important supplies not in your kit, Lodging, have you recognized alternative places to stay? What's identified right now for that? Are we going to an in-laws place? Is it accessible? Do they have need areas? Do they have a generator? If I'm going to a shelter, what assistance might I need? Medications, prescription and over-the-counter meds. So what this does is allow you to have everything identified by physicians, family, friends, and neighbors in my support network, lodging and sheltering, and extensive pages on medication, so I can list all of them. Go back to the comment I made about the emergency manager from Sioux Falls saying you have something next to your bed or on your kitchen table. Well, this could be it right here. Everything you need to know. Continuing. Medical treatments. Do I have regular medical treatments, monthly, weekly, bi-weekly? I should say bi-monthly. What procedures do I receive? We talk about dialysis. My good friend Steve, who has schizophrenia, goes for his monthly shot, which has put him in a really good place over the last 4 years. We don't want that interrupted. People, family, friends, physicians, care assistants, and translators. They all identified. My pets and service animals, separate. We're obviously separating service animals and pets. So service animals to include our vet contact info. We want to maintain independence. And then transportation, what might be alternative providers? Remember what Marcy said in her discussion about some people will use paratransit or other forms? Do we know what their plans are in an emergency? One of the points that was made with Katrina was that many of the, especially senior care facilities, had transportation aligned in their plan. They had the same transportation provider. So transportation is something we spend, and for you folks that went through our 2-day program, you recall, we spent a good half an hour on this topic. And that content all comes from my FEMA guide here. So this is items and information that FEMA put together specific to what we need to address. Okay, and again, the MARC guide is in there. These items will also be available post-training through NILE. Okay, so a kind of a wrap up on our personal preparedness here. Interpreters, there is an interpreter in this video. And what you're also going to note here is what we should be doing now with videos is what they call audio descriptions or narrated captioning. So for our friends and colleagues who are blind or have low vision, it's describing what's on the screen. So as we progress in our general effective communication and we develop videos and such, this is the way we're supposed to go.
Dappled sunlight through trees and a wisteria-covered front porch.
No 2 days are alike.
An older woman sorts her medication.
So every day, you prepare.
A woman who is blind feeds her service dog.
For yourself?
She places the bowl on the floor and he eats.
For those you love?
A mother using a wheelchair packs a lunchbox. Her daughter takes it, kisses her, and runs off.
For whatever the day may bring.
A man who is deaf signs to a loved one and departs.
Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days. Food and water, medication and supplies.
The older woman assembles her kit,
as well as any important documents you may need.
She includes a USB drive.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different.
The man who is deaf stores his kit in the closet.
There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you.
The mother using a wheelchair closes her kit and hugs her daughter. Words on screen.
Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. Ready.gov/myplan.
Okay, and here is the September Preparedness Month. I'm going to open this. I'm going to need to stop screen share and then come back around. So not leaving you, just, okay, so everyone should be seeing the ready.gov. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but extensive amount of information and resources. Okay, ready.gov/September. Hold on, folks. I just had a little hiccup. I'm going to go back to the, I'm not going to go through that for the sake of time, but I wanted to show it to you. And come back around to, oh, okay. Well, there it is. Had a bump. Quickly, an extensive amount of tools, videos, publications, About Ready, Preparedness Portal, Ready Kids, Ready Business, Making a Plan. Okay. So again, more tools, more access. Want to point those out to you. Hope we find them helpful. And let's go back here. Okay, so we should be seeing the PowerPoint page now. Okay, so preparedness. So 211, if you're not familiar with 211, New York State is an outstanding tool. When I train first responders, I call this our 10-second social work lesson. So expose yourself and get in tune with 211. Go to the website, 211nys.org. In our state, it's regionally established. So we're broken down into the region, say Western New York, Finger Lakes, Central New York, et cetera. During the pandemic early on and into the pandemic, it became our go-to in Western New York here. We have an outstanding program in Western New York. 24/7 food, shelter, clothing, disabilities, pregnancy, mental health, employment, substance use, utilities. If someone's utilities are going to be turned off, while trained police officers say you don't want to evict someone, call 211. Many people are not aware of the services they provide. Okay, so it helps in our preparedness, and most of the 211s I've seen now are playing a role with COVID response and supports. I mentioned the registry earlier, so I do have a page on it here. The concern simply being, I'll go right to the cons, it's a lengthy data gathering process, it's constant updating, possible legal issues, it's never fully complete, and the biggest concern is a sense of false hope. I filled out a form, now someone's going to come and get me when the alarm sounds, when the disaster or the emergency is in progress. Marcy Roth in her role at FEMA was not a supporter of the registries. Some still have them. Our town has it. People fill it. I've filled out mine. But what purposes does it really serve? You know, it's used for notification of evacuation, or is it? Are we going to prioritize evacuation? How are they going to do that? So I know I'm being the glass half empty with this discussion here, but I make people aware because it's out there, and we don't want it to be our sole source, if at all a source specific to the topic, but it may serve a purpose. In our town, the emergency services manager tied it into fire control. I went to fire control. My house came up in red. They recognized that someone was a wheelchair user. I certainly find that as functional. And I made this comment earlier about this slide here, Administrator Fugate. My experience tells me if we wait and plan for people with disabilities after we write the basic plan, we fail. Note the time frame here, speaking to the Senate Ad Hoc Committee on August 4, 2009, Katrina 2006, the Post-Katrina Act 2007 or 8, 2009, the testifying here, 2011, the White House Memorandum of Understanding signing with the National Disability Rights Network, 2013 and 14, the creation of the Access and Functional Needs Training, the core advisory group concept within that 13 and 14 timeframe, and now here we are today. So we continue to advance the cause, our education, the tools, and the equipment and resources, but we need to now implement them and put them to play. Legal guidance specific to this program, specific to this topic, the Robert Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, which started off the recognition that we needed to do more specific to planning. Again, the Post-Katrina Act I mentioned. What you'll find in the emergency planning now is the 15 emergency support functions, of which 6 and 8 are ones that are not specific to people with disabilities and access and functional needs. One is mass care and one is health and human services, but this is where our topic area falls under. So FEMA Region 2 has an emergency support function 6 monthly meeting, which I sit in as often as possible. Our Region 2 is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So I, in essence, represent our faction here within that concept, which in some ways has exposed the lack of progress that we're doing in the state. But we're looking to work with them. I'm cautious of my sarcasm, but I am concerned, and I say that with all due respect to the individuals who put time in. Sometimes I think their hands are tied from a higher power, but I'm hoping the new governor is going to embrace this and move forward with where we're coming from. The ADA in Title II, emergency management, website accessibility, and the need for an ADA coordinator, notice and grievance procedure. In our county, our ADA coordinator is an active, very active player with this topic and program, to the point of one of the chairs of the core advisory group. So the litigation, what is the main topics? And again, I made the point earlier that our list is not this long laundry list of 15, 20, 30 items. The 3 lawsuits, the main topic of concern across all 3 of them, New York, LA, and Oakland, is building evacuation, accessible transportation, shelters and evacuation centers, power outages, communications, and recovery. This was the consistent theme across all 3 lawsuits. The New York City lawsuit filed by the Brooklyn Center for Independence versus Bloomberg, also the Center for Independence New York, and Susan Duha, now retired, but Susan was a major player in pushing this forward. She was the one that was 5 years before Superstorm Sandy hit, was going and letting the New York City Office of Emergency Management know, especially that shelters were not accessible, getting no response, and basically saying, well, someone can go to the shelter 10 blocks up the road. It's not how it works. Those days are gone. So the Brooklyn Center for Independence versus Bloomberg, the failure of the evacuation plans to accommodate the needs of people with disabilities with respect to high-rise evacuation and accessible transportation. So an interesting point to that is the Fire Department of New York, FDNY, we contracted with, developed their training on this. Why they brought us in was because they got brought in under the lawsuit, even though they're not the Office of Emergency Management, based on the high-rise evacuation. The failure of the shelter plans to require that the shelter system be sufficiently accessible. The failure of New York City to have a plan for ensuring that people with disabilities are able to access the services provided by the city after an emergency, the recovery process. The failure of plans to provide for accessible communications. So what do we have on this call? We have CART, we have ASL interpretation. We need to be conscious, and we train on and give all the tools that the ADA provides under effective communications of the 25 or so options specific to accessible communication. Why am I reading every page? Because I'm providing accessible communication for our attendees who do not read, who may be blind or have low vision, or other need areas specific to their inability to read the pages. Sometimes people say, I get in evaluations, you read every page. Yes, I did, intentionally, for that reason. The failure of New York City's outreach and education program to provide persons with disabilities the same opportunity as others to develop a personal emergency plan. So we want to, and this is where we come back around to the emergency management offices. Where's someone going to go? If I move into a new town, am I thinking to call it an independent living center? Do I know what an independent living center is? Am I thinking that I'm going to call, say, Deaf Access Services, Western New York? I mean, again, maybe, let's hope. But my first thought is the emergency management office. Well, what are we doing to educate? See, outreach and education. The emergency plans, well, that's what we're providing here. New York City's lack of sufficient plans to provide persons with disabilities information about the existence and location of accessible services in an emergency. Okay, so here's, in essence, what came about with the New York City lawsuit, which further emphasized by the judge. And note the point here I have highlighted. Unfortunately, despite the obvious importance of accounting for the unique needs of people with disabilities and planning emergencies, New York City's emergency plans, like many state and local emergency plans throughout the nation, fail to do so. He recognized this was not just New York City's issue, it was a national issue in most municipalities. The reason the Developmental Disabilities Planning Council funded emergency management disability awareness training was based on the fact that our state had a lawsuit. Obviously, it was New York City, but within our state, we had a lawsuit in response to the population that we're addressing here. So it's inherent upon us to, again, recognize internally our town, our county, our city, and what their plans are, and support and assist these individuals in addressing that. Portlight Strategies has now been morphed into the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, which I mentioned earlier. Again, you can go to these websites and view their content. The partnership mission is equal access and full inclusion for the whole community before, during, and after disaster. It was established to identify and bridge gaps, increase sustainable relationships, and grow the number of emergency preparedness actors committed to inclusive emergency management. That's you folks. To be a member of the partnership costs you nothing. Our office is, there's about 140 members, and it shows support. The READY Act and the DERMA Act, which we'll highlight towards the end here, that are active right now, that we need your presence and support in contacting our senators and Congress members. This is Marcy's brainchild off of her departure from FEMA. In that role, she started the partnership, which is now actively maintained by two very competent individuals who continue to address that. Portlight Strategies is boots on the ground, where individuals, note 1997, note the comment made here specific to their role with Superstorm Sandy, where they were active for 18 months in New York and New Jersey. They had come in and addressed the needs of people with disabilities in conjunction with the emergency management and the emergency operations center and the plan specific to recovery and mitigation. I should say response, recovery, and mitigation. So again, another area to take a look at. They have some excellent resources and tools on there, and that's all encompassing. Because our objective is ultimately that planning is integrated. We're never separating planning to address excess and functional needs. Be specific about roles and responsibilities, and we work together and we work smart. So this is, again, a FEMA page recognizing if we're going to do this right, it's going to be an integrated process. So roles and responsibilities, what's that mean? Folks, you'll have roles and responsibilities. We want them. When we did accessibility reviews of our points of distribution in Erie County, it was the ADA coordinator, myself, the Independent Living Center, and the Director of Public Policy, who's a wheelchair user, Todd Barwick. Some of you may know Todd. The Department of Health Emergency Preparedness nurse, Patty Ann Kaczynski, who actually also worked for our program as well, fire EMS training, and the Olmsted Center for, at the time, called the Visually Impaired. So we did the accessibility reviews of those points of distributions. We were assigned roles and responsibilities. Deaf Access Services was assigned the responsibility of identifying the clear mass during the pandemic. Identify vendors, identify costs, identify which ones we should be utilizing, and bring that back to the county. So this is what we talk about, integrated planning and integration in this concept. Then the ADA. So what does the ADA say specific to this program, this topic area? Preparation, as we've referenced, some of the points made, you saw with New York City, notification, evacuation and transportation, sheltering. And again, folks, we're giving 2 hours here. We have a lot of content on some of these topic areas that we're just informing you of how this plays out. First aid and medical services, temporary lodging and housing. We think of recovery. Are they accessible? Are they built with the concept of universal design in place and universal accessibility? Transition back to the community. My services, what about my personal care assistance? I've gone 3 weeks living in a shelter, and my My supports and assistance have also been affected. I can't just transition back like that. There's going to be need areas, my medications, my equipment that was damaged. Cleanup and other emergency and disaster-related program services and activities. No state or local government or its contractors are providing services made by law, policy, or contract provide services below those standards without violating federal law. And just a point to be made here, the contractors must be compliant with the ADA, but it's the responsibility of the government entity bringing in those contractors to ensure ADA compliance. Sometimes the local government's not aware of that. We hired a contractor, it's on them to be ADA compliant. With this is with anything. So note that if we're going to be, say, building temporary lodging and housing, well, the state or local government needs to be sure and advising to the point of bringing in, again, those key players from the core advisory group or from the disability community to be active in that role. You're familiar with the concept of universal design. I believe many of you adapt a standard environment until it becomes usable by most. We talk about this based on the comment I just made, universal accessibility. The concept of universal design was created by Ron Macy, an architect that has since passed away from North Carolina. Ron's intentions were to, noting that his fellow architects continue to have many ADA non-compliant structures built and then costing the project a lot more money than it was originally budgeted for. Let's develop a concept of universal accessibility and design in our buildings and our structures. We want to embrace that concept and make aware our municipal employees and emergency managers of the concept specific to this program. It spins into your active role with committees or councils within your jurisdictions, with your towns. The town of Amherst is actually the largest town in the state of New York, 129,000 residents. So I'm told by the New York State Association of Towns. So if your town's larger, take it up with the Association of Towns. And it's not the Association of Independent Living. But just noting here that the entire review of the municipality starts with the municipal building, the building commissioners and the highway department, facilities and grounds who have a role with this. But that ADA coordinator needs to be active. Our town is now completely accessible through the fact of we did the self-evaluation and transition plan that they had already done. We as a committee just inherited and ensured that they were moving forward. That ties into our emergency planning as well. So we want to be having these active committees. Here's the mission of Amherst. The town of Amherst Committee on Disabilities shall study and offer suggestions and recommendations to improve compliance of the town with the goals and objectives of the ADA, as well as to consider any other issues relevant to and important to disabled town residents. I show you this because, one, if you need information on establishing your committees, make it work. Two, because this directly spins into what we're talking about. The person we've met with the most is our town emergency manager. Yeah, we met with the chief of police and the town clerk and the town recreation director and the town and the highway department. But who do we meet with the most? Emergency management. Why? Because this is life and death. Specific to the ADA, it's from a municipal standpoint, we make them aware and you make them aware. As a municipal employee, you're covered under Title II of the ADA, and you have responsibilities you must understand and adhere to. Fair to do so will expose your entire municipality. We make them aware, and you'll see in Project Civic Access that this can come back to haunt you if you haven't done this, your accessibility reviews and become ADA compliant. The ADA Center for the nationwide number, if you have issues or topics specific to the ADA, 1-800-949-4232 on the screen here. Utilize them for direction and discussion specific to the ADA. But what I'm going to show you here is Project Civic Access. And this is a program started by the Department of Justice a few years after the ADA went into effect. Project Civic Access intentions were to address the lack of progress or even intent of a municipality to be, make the screen bigger, you should all be seeing the ADA screen now. So unless I'll someone can note in the chat box if you're not, but this should be the screen you're seeing. Project Civic Access, while dormant over the last couple of years, addresses municipal responsiveness to becoming ADA compliant, hangs over the heads of, and I'd like to see it reignited. There is discussion about reigniting it, but the intent is to address the ADA noncompliance by basically a surprise visit. The Department of Justice will show up on a Monday morning and say, open up your books. What I want to show you here is the toolkit. And again, not to go through all of this, but website accessibility, curbs and ramps, general effective communication. This is everything a municipality needs to know. And this is what the Department of Justice pushes on them. Note emergency management has several different categories to include a checklist for both compliance with the ADA and shelters. To show you how it comes to play, I'll open up one in New York State. The most recent, Madison County, was visited in 2015. And the purpose is to go through everything. So I'm going to scroll down to them. I'm going to slowly here. You'll see notification, architect, the grievance procedure, general effective communication, 911, law enforcement and effective communication, employment, polling places, little issue there in Madison County, and emergency management procedures and policies. Note within the context of this, 37A, the county's emergency operation plan will include procedures to solicit, receive, and use input from people with a variety of disabilities on its emergency management plan, which includes preparation, notification, response, and cleanup. It's expected by federal law that people with disabilities are active in this planning process. What have we done to outreach to our municipalities? What are we doing to ensure that they're aware of what we are addressing here today? Again, the tools and resources provided will give you some assistance. If your county already has a CAG, of which 18 up to 22 now do, and you need some support or assistance, please reach out to us. We are continuing to do that. If you don't have one, let us know, and we will move forward on that. The intent is the whole community. People with access and functional needs make up 2/3 of a community. So the concept of whole community, a FEMA concept, is branded, but the intention is let's make sure we're recognizing everyone in our community and responding appropriately. Whole community planning looks beyond traditional government-centric approach to emergency planning. Aims to dispel old thinking that government can solve challenges on its own. Engages and leverages community partner resources, that's you. It expands government reach. So we're utilizing those services and supports that the Independent Living Center provides, DD Service Provider, Senior Care Facilities, Office of Aging, National Federation for the Blind, Buffalo chapter. These are the folks that sit on our core advisory group in the county. The intent of the group is that disability advocacy organizations, service providers, and people with disabilities, both at the state and local level, are participating. This is a FEMA concept. It's defined over 3 pages. So it's not a heavy lift, but it's active. It's always ongoing. Yeah, I'm talking about what we're doing here. Oneida County has a very progressive core advisory group. Broome County has a very progressive core advisory group. Bear with me if I'm remiss on noting others that are. But that's the intent. Our overall objective is that active planning. So it's a lot more than just who is personally prepared. What are we doing to provide that? How are we working with those individuals? And I talk about the Committee on Disabilities because we can have that as a spin-off, but that shouldn't be a Committee on Disabilities and a core advisory group. There should be a distinction. In Erie County, we took the Disability Advisory Board, spun off a core advisory group. Core advisory group, since the pandemic started, has basically been our main focus with a lot less specific to the other areas, but we are picking that back up while still addressing the pandemic. We met the first 20 Fridays in a row of the pandemic, our core advisory group. We were addressing issues within the week. So when a wheelchair user got dropped off at a drive-up test site And when he pulled up in his chair, minus a vehicle, because paratransit was not going to wait in line, they refused to test him. We addressed that by Friday. It happened to be a state test site, not a county test site, so the county was relieved when it wasn't a county site. But the county also had a direct pipeline to the state testing. Whereas if I'm calling or the Independent Living Center's calling or another group's calling, you're not going to get as much response. That never happened again. Again, some points I made about mass and such by the Deaf Access, Western New York Deaf Access Services addressing. The checklist for integrating people with disabilities and access and functional needs. Again, our checklists aren't long. The topic areas have more to do. The planning process, communications, ensuring they are effective, sheltering, and everything that goes with accessibility. And again, a lot more to this than what you're getting today, folks. Evacuation, transportation, recovery, and ensuring that training and exercises are using people with disabilities and access and functional needs. We're not going to tell two staffers from the Department of Health to go in a manual wheelchair, and then you'll be the persons in the wheelchair. Doesn't serve a purpose. Lived experiences, and then the personal preparedness as we've referenced. Inclusive planning, simply put, is individuals with disabilities and access and functional needs are at the table. The emergency planning councils and committees have representation, and plans are all inclusive. We don't have an annex. We don't have gaps. When we reviewed the Town of Amherst committee, the Town of Amherst emergency plan, there was 18 areas to be addressed. Those were addressed. We did that over 3 hours, put it up on the screen. Our town's plan addresses that area. We should be in a good spot. Active participation is that all accessibility reviews are conducted with individuals. We talked about the points of distribution. I don't want an emergency manager, nor does he or she want to go do an accessibility review. We want people who know what accessibility is. And we want an eclectic group, like we had 5 representatives at our pod reviews. What about recovery centers? Websites need to be accessible. The emergency operations centers have a person that can address matters and questions. In Rockland County, the Independent Living Center sits at the table at the Emergency Operations Center. They have a spot, they showed me, right next to the state trooper and the sheriff department is the Independent Living Center seat. The ADA coordinator downtown does, but he has the contact information for all people across the spectrum of the core advisory group. So if there's an emergency, we're all ready at a moment's notice to respond. A lot of that would be outreach. Disability advocacy organizations are assigned to address outreach, provide resources, information. You get assignments with active participation. Exercises always include people, as I stated, and equipment assisted technology have the approval of the individuals who are going to utilize them. In defining disability, any physical or mental condition that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So we want to be conscious that we don't just use the terms autism, cerebral palsy, Alzheimer's disease. What is substantially limited that limits my ability to move forward? Caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, working, sitting, standing, lifting, reaching, and others. The issue that we have here is that people will hear cerebral palsy and think there's a greater need. My son has every bullet up here but hearing and breathing. In a minute, you're going to see a video that is has an individual with cerebral palsy who's over this page and doesn't need supports.
I have cerebral palsy.
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 My disability is cerebral palsy. I don't have an intellectual disability.
I go to grad school.
I advocate.
I go to high school.
I work at a major bank.
I have a bachelor's and master's degree in social work.
I'm a college graduate. I drive my own car.
I live in my own apartment in the city of Buffalo.
I live in this house.
I vote.
I go to church.
I attend ball games.
I'm active in my church.
I have a girlfriend on my own house.
I like to go to the movies. I like to go swimming.
I take singing lessons.
I drive a car.
I like rock.
I run a non-for-profit charity.
I vote.
I am on
the board of directors of Niagara Cerebral Palsy.
I have a job in the community.
I may need a little assistance and support, but see me as I am.
I go to science fiction conventions.
I play baseball.
I participate in triathlons and half marathons.
I go to movies.
Name Mary.
If I come to your workplace, are there barriers?
Do you know how to handle a person with a disability in an emergency or crisis?
Please like that. Accessible, talking about.
I have big dreams and high expectations for myself. Do you know what they are?
And I prefer if you pull up a chair if we're going to have a long conversation.
Occasionally I may need your help, but please respect me for the adult that I am.
People with cerebral palsy live, work, and recreate in your community.
Apologize for the choppiness, folks, but the point being, we're seeing every disability has a spectrum, and if we define it by, or what we find is that the lay community out there is not understanding of disability. They hear disability, they think medical needs, medical shelter. Don't see the person as an equal. What does Larry say at the beginning here? I don't have an intellectual disability. Well, why does he need to say that? Because people view him as having an intellectual disability. So there are the various ways it comes to play in the various need areas. We need to define this under the concept of excess and functional needs, which is actions, services, accommodations, and programmatic, architectural, and communication modifications the covered entity must undertake and provide to individuals with disabilities. So in defining access and functional needs, individuals are from diverse cultures, races, and nations of origin. Individuals who can't read, have limited English proficiency, or are non-English speaking. That's a lot of people right there. The CDC identifies that 26% of the American population has a disability. We're now at 26%. My comment a couple minutes ago when we had the oval chart there, that's upwards of 2/3 of the population has an access or functional need. Well, look where we're at right now. And we haven't necessarily touched on disability here. Can't read could be someone with a learning disability. Tom Cruise, Charles Schwab, Richard Branson. Limited English proficiency, non-English speaking. American Sign Language is the fourth most used language in this country, upwards of 4 million Americans. Older adults with and without disabilities, with 65 plus, and 50% have some form of functional need. Children with and without disabilities make sense in an emergency, right? They're not going to be completely prepared. And I'm not just talking, say, 8, 9, 10, 12, 9, 10. I'm talking 12, 13, 14, 15. People have economic or transportation needs. I don't have a car. I don't have enough food in my house to shelter in place for 3 to 7 days. Women who are pregnant, people with chronic medical conditions, those with pharmacological dependencies. Go back to my reference of my friend Steve, who gets his shot once a month to address his challenges specific to schizophrenia. Social advocacy and service agencies. You come to play here. Meals on Wheels. I rely on my independent living center for transportation. My senior care facility for supports, and people with disabilities. So it expands out to a much wider array here. Folks, unfortunately, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip this video. Apologize for that. Emergency planning topics. And we talk about the effective communication modes and notification, sheltering, accessibility are in place, transportation, personal care assistance, and the media. So what are we working on and what are we looking to address? So spinning back and bringing us to closure here, some of the things we realized with COVID-19. First of all, no one was prepared for this. Not a knock on anyone. We openly hear FEMA say it and emergency managers. Again, disability lives lost rank at the top. Congregate care was not considered in planning before. Now, obviously, it needs to be. Personal protective equipment needs caught everyone off guard. And we're wearing masks. I think I still have a mask right here that was made by someone back last March and April. Remember the mask production by people? Shelter in place took on a whole new meaning. My neighbor in my backyard, no disability. I talked to her in June last year. She is still yet to leave the house. Food supplies, delivery and assistance, now an agenda item in emergency management. Wasn't before. Medical services in hospitals, still happening today. Watch the news this morning. Where are we at? The governor just made moves on elective surgeries, not happening. Developmental disability services interruptions and the challenges that came with that. The plan of action recovery is in the planning and preparedness phases. This is unheard of. We plan, we prepare, we respond, we recover. While we're recovering, we're still planning and preparing right now. Addressing personal preparedness, personal protective equipment needs are ongoing. We want to stock, don't hoard, but we need to educate on use. Identify systems of support, especially those living independently. Essential needs identified. Therapies were lost. I became a physical therapy assistant for about 4 or 5 months. Behavioral supports interrupted. The spike in behaviors with some individuals. Advocates and their role or lack thereof. Medical needs. The ability to get to doctors. Transportation aligned with needs. Transportation got altered. We were no longer taking people to therapy. We were taking them to grocery stores. Information sharing, development disability service providers and family members and others had major interruptions, major gaps, lack of computer, lack of FaceTime, parents not seeing their kids for months. Testing sites and points of distribution, accessible and accommodating, and we want to start a core advisory group. So I know I'm running out of time here. Just to close. Yep.
We're just coming up to time, so I just want to make sure the interpreters and the captioner will be able to stay with us. I put a message in the chat to them. So I just want to make sure that they were able to see that.
Thank you, Trudy. We got a thumbs up from Trudy.
Okay, good. So we got our ASL interpreters.
And folks, yeah, just to close here, I ask you to go to the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. I'll look up the Real Emergency Action for Aging and Disability Inclusion Act that's happening now. This is sponsored by Senator Casey. It has Pennsylvania. It has bipartisan support. We want to get this act passed. Contact your senators and Congress members and the Disaster Relief Medicaid Act, ensuring that Medicaid dollars are consistent across state lines, which people lose when they go across state lines, and they're forced to go across state lines, but they didn't want to. My contact information, our website, please spend some time on it. We have a lot of information specific to this topic area. That's my direct office line. We have extensive information specific to COVID-19. We provided that throughout the pandemic. We did a bi-weekly newsletter on information. Sincerely appreciate everyone coming. I'm going to look in the question and answers. I know are going over. I told you at the top that might be the case. We have someone from Louisiana. Eleanor, contact me by phone number there. Carrie, if you can put in the chat box my email. Can we have the link to this ready video? The ready video, I believe we had that. Which I'm not sure which one you're talking about, Eleanor, but we would provide those links. Dave, is all this information out there in other language for those disabled individuals that are not English speaking? To varying degrees, Martha. From my standpoint, I don't have it in other languages, but we can look to assist in interpretation and utilization of those entities. Folks, I'm going to stay around. Again, I apologize for the getting up to time here. It's usually the case with me in trainings. In the chat box is my direct office line and also my email. We will follow up with you. Appreciate your interest, your efforts. Stay safe, stay well, vaccinate, and wear a mask. I will stay around for more questions. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Niall, for bringing us on. You're welcome, Melissa. Thank you, Chris. You're welcome. Thanks, Karen.
I just added a link to the chat with the page on our website where we're gonna have your materials, Dave. I've already put some of the PDFs that Carrie shared on there, and we'll be updating that when we finish the recording.
Yeah, what I'd like to do with you folks is expand the content and be sure that you're getting everything as it comes out. And just by having this here, we can continue to grow off of it. And I can point, you know, like I said earlier, people are going to be, they don't know we exist. You know, people know the association exists. So I want to be sure that we have as many options as available out there for people to receive the information.
So we have Sue Ruff with a question, so I'm going to allow her to talk.
You're going to allow Sue to talk? All right.
You can unmute yourself, Sue.
I just wanted to say thank you very much, Dave, because I've known you for several years, and every time I come to one of your trainings, I learn more. And I really appreciate all of the work that you're doing and have done over in Niagara County. Have other counties or cities gotten in touch with Niagara County for assistance in making their emergency plans?
So actually, what I was referencing was what happening in Erie County. Niagara County still needs to get up to speed, but specific to that, not really. You know, we've talked about it at the CAG, or the New York State CAG. I mean, one of my intentions today was that people hearing that are going to be comfortable in reaching out to us to utilize them. Like Frank Cameretta, the ADA coordinator, he's very open to providing support and guidance to anyone, as is Patty Ann Kaczynski. They're both county employees. Patty Ann is involved in our program. She's one of our startup master trainers for fire EMS. She's been in the field a long time. She actually has a couple of disabilities. So we're open to that, but I think that's a work in progress too, specific to what we want to do with the KEG and then what we want to do with the Nile and with the NYSILK. Because we, you know, as I said, we are sustained. You know, one of the points that always comes up with grants, especially council grants, is how you're going to be sustained. Well, this is how we're going to sustain. We're going to assist in the buildup here. We're not going to be able to do trainings without support, but we're going to be able to assist in working with. We're working with Onondaga County right now. They're looking to resurrect their CAG. I've had 3 or 4 meetings. As a matter of fact, I just got an invite for another one in January. Yeah, I'll be there for that if I can I'll work around my schedule. I'm going to be there for that. So we're here. We want to make it work. And there's Jeff Bowles. Look at the 2 people that I talk about the most, Sue and Jeff, as far as active ILs, both have a question. What do you got, Jeff? Sue, first of all, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that anybody on here would feel that they could certainly reach out to you, but also to the people that you have been working with in Western New York, who have taken this work very personally and are doing whatever they can. And watching all of the bad things that happened in COVID in the last year, 2 years actually, educating our communities has been really, really important. And some counties have done a wonderful job in helping people with access and functional needs in terms of testing, vaccinations, and so forth. So, you know, but I know there are some areas out there in the state where the need persists.
And absolutely. And let me say this, we got work to do too in Erie County.
Oh,
so
everybody does, yeah.
Yeah, I'm cautious, and you know, I certainly wouldn't say we're the gold standard. We have a good progress going. Hey, Jeff, you got a question? You want to?
Yeah, first of all, how are you?
Good. And if Sue's still on there, I want to come back around to you and Sue about those disability advisory panels specific to first response. So we are making that move. So you guys are on our radar in the next coming months. Go ahead, Jeff.
So far as the two current pieces of legislation, do you know if NIAL will be sending something out like action alerts for people to take action?
Well, Niall's still on the line here, so I'm not going to answer that for Megan, Lindsay, or Alex. Folks, you want to take that?
Are they still there?
Looks like Megan and Lindsay are still here. I'm sure Alex is still here too. Alex, did you catch Jeff's question about dissemination of information?
Yeah, so Niall is still sending out action alerts. Megan Parker, our director of advocacy, she just unmuted herself, so I'll let her answer the question, but Niall is still sending out action alerts.
Hi, Megan.
Was there a particular type of action alert?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on the two pieces of legislation David spoke about today. They are very, very important as far as inclusive emergency management and playing and people should be contacting their representatives to get those passed.
Oh, so this is legislation on emergency management?
Right, the two pieces they've talked about today, the REMMI and the Medicaid.
So the READY Act and the DERMA Act, Jeff?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So is Niall taking a position on that and getting the word out? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because I see action alerts from Niall, but nothing regarding those two pieces of legislation. So I'm wondering if they're planning on doing something.
Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, sorry, it's Megan. I don't know what, I was having issues unmuting for a while and I kept talking to you and anyway, yeah, we've supported when those bills were released. We really, when it comes to the federal stuff, tend to follow the national orgs like Nickel. So they did, I think we did an alert and signed on and kind of helped distribute their sign-on letter in support of Dharma and Ready when those were released, and we'll continue to do that. But I haven't seen an alert from Nickel on that issue in a couple months, but we, always feel free to forward stuff along if you think there's something we're missing as well.
Right, okay.
Okay.
I just haven't seen anything lately, and I'm wondering if I was missing something, because as they've alluded to today, the two pieces of very important legislation. So far as I'm concerned, I realize I'm preaching at the choir, but they need to be passed. They need to be passed and go into effect.
Yeah, I think most of the energy at the national level has been on Build Back Better, right? And trying to get funding for the home and community-based services and stuff. But I agree with you; those are really important issues. I haven't seen a lot of activity on anything other than the two big pieces of legislation Congress had been working on, the infrastructure bill and now Build Back Better. So,
Right.
yeah, but we can also connect on this moving forward. Feel free to reach out, Jeff.
Well, I'm gonna pay more attention to the NIO website and see if I see anything, because I don't want to repeat myself, but people need to blow the phone loud to the representatives on this.
Yeah.
Anyone else? We're going on quarter two, 15 minutes after. All right, folks, I think we got a wrap here. Alex, Megan?
Dave, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Appreciate your time. And we'll definitely make sure all those resources are up on the website for folks moving forward.
Okay, and I think what I look to do is we can get you more and kind of build off of this.
Great.
Do you guys do an evaluation?
Not necessarily after the webinars, but we can.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm just, if you do, if you don't, no problem. If you do.
Okay.
But yeah, no, all good. I don't do them for most of mine either, so.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Great.
All right, wonderful. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate you bringing me in. I hope this was helpful. We had a good crowd. That was a good number.
Yeah, it was good. That was great. Thanks so much.
Okay, stay well,
Okay.
guys.
You
Happy
too.
holidays.
You too.
Visit our website at ilny.org/training-education for more.